Hi friends, Cathy Madeo here. I've got my brand new puppy joining me today. Her name's Honey. We'll welcome her to the channel. Today's video is all about triangle pose. I'm going to give you a thorough breakdown on this pose. Grab a block if you'll be doing it with me, and let's get started. Triangle pose is a common standing yoga pose in which the hips are in external rotation. So we could say then that this is a hip opening pose. But it's kind of a complex pose because not only is it opening the hips, but the legs are straight. So we know that it's stretching things like the hamstrings. And since it's an open hip, it's also stretching the adductors. But because there's a bit of a fold and a little bit of a twist in there, it's also accessing the side torso muscles and outer hip muscles as well. So again, it's quite a complex pose, and we're going to break this down. The first thing I'm going to do is just quickly go through a demo of the pose. So standing here with my front foot, the heel, in center arch alignment to the back foot. So basically, you could draw a straight line down the mat there from the heel to the center back arch. The arms are reaching out long, and I lean forward so that as I fold, I'm folding through my hips here. And the legs are remaining straight, and the hand may or may not reach the ground. The chest is turned to the side, and then your gaze would be upward. Now there's a lot of different variations depending on what lineage you practice with. You might see some people with the hand forward or grabbing the toe. You might see people with the hand up on the leg. So for today, we're going to just go over where to place the body in space and know that any of those little minor variations, that is more style over substance in this case. The most common thing I see happening in this pose is that people want to get the hand down, or they think that the hand has to touch the floor. And if the hand can't touch the floor because something's restricting it, then the body will compensate in some way. And so what tends to happen, the compensation that tends to happen, is people will reach forward. And the whole torso will go forward in an effort to touch the ground. Now, because this top arm has to reach up to the ceiling, what happens when our chest is kind of in this flex position and then we try to turn up to the ceiling, that creates another compensation in the top shoulder. Namely, the shoulder starts to internally rotate. You can see it's rolling forward. And that could potentially cause some pinching in the shoulder. It's certainly not going to feel good, and it's definitely not stretching the chest, which is one of the things this pose can do. So we want to undo this situation, and the quickest way to undo that is to back out of the pose here and place your hand on a block instead of the floor. So there's no need to have the hand on the floor. And if you don't have a block, you could also just take your fingers onto the leg. I like to place it to the inside of my leg at that point, because then you can push your hand into the leg and leg into the hand to help align this shoulder here, the bottom shoulder as well. So when we're thinking about where the torso is in space, you want it to go directly over the leg, so it's in line with the leg. So it's not behind and it's not reaching forward. So if the torso is in line with the leg, the next thing, compensation I see happening, is that students will fold here through the waist. And you might see this kind of short looking triangle pose here with almost like a crescent shape through the torso. So we want to instead take the fold at the hip joint. This is a hip opening pose. So instead of folding here through the torso, you want the stretch to be happening along the outer hip. So instead, we're going to take the front thigh bone into the hip socket so that we can fold here through the hip. Notice my torso isn't bending at all, it's remaining straight as I hinge through the hip joint. And then at that point, wherever your hand is going to land, like we don't want to force it, we're already in this nice healthy alignment, that's where the hand is going to land. So if it's on the floor, it's on the floor. If it's on a puppy, it's on a puppy, or maybe your leg. The other thing to think about is the chest. So there's a bit of a twist here because we're in this external hip position, but the chest is oriented to the side. In some ways, what's happening is the bottom rib cage turns, and that's where there's a bit of a twist through the thoracic spine. This is why I consider this quite a complex pose, right? So we're opening up the hips, we're folding from the hip joint, and then the chest or the bottom ribs turn to the side. Both of the shoulders, the arm bones, are in external rotation, so you don't want them rolling in. They're rolling away from the chest, so the palms could be facing forward. Now, in terms of the neck, you want the crown of the head pointing, because the whole torso is over the leg. You want it pointing forward, but you could shift your gaze ultimately up towards the ceiling, up towards the right thumb, the top thumb, or if that bothers your neck, you'll just shift your gaze forward, but still let your neck be long rather than letting it dangle there, because the weight of the skull is quite heavy, right? And that can pull something there. So let's just review, and I'll switch sides here. So I'm going to now point my right foot forward and my left foot in. And by the way, the left foot, because we are in an external hip rotation of the legs, you don't want the toes pointing in because that would spiral the leg inward to inward rotation. We want to open the hips. That means that the thigh bones move away in the hip sockets. They roll away from the midline. So your foot is parallel to the back edge of the mat, the back foot, and the front foot is pointing forward. And remember, we've got our front heel to back arch alignment. So the thighs, again, are rolling away from the midline. That's why this is a hip opening pose. Now we'll reach the right arm forward and allow that fold to come in the hip socket so the side body is remaining long. And I'm going to add on another kind of pro tip here. If you come to your edge and you notice the top ribs start to lift up, you can take your fingers and actually press them down, those top ribs down, to help lengthen through the side body. So again, your chest is turning to the side, your gaze is either forward or upward at the thumb. Now, another common tendency is hyperextension at the knee joint. Because this is a challenging pose, especially making our way down, folks have a tendency towards hyperextension, which is where the joint goes beyond normal range. And the issue with that with yoga is that then that means we're not using our muscles. We're kind of dumping into the joints to access the pose, and that can create some undue tension in there. So one of the things, if you notice your back knee is behind your thigh or the front knee as well, just to maybe take a little micro bend or remind your quadriceps to engage, to turn on. The quadriceps are the muscles that straighten the knee. So then you're using your muscles to straighten the knee rather than relying on those open joints. I know that was a lot of information, but if you've been watching the videos on my channel, you know that I love alignment. You know I'm going to give you my best tips. And if you want to learn more, if you want to really know the yoga practice, go through all of the most common postures in this kind of breakdown way where you can really understand alignment and learn how to use props and learn different variations, then I want you to consider my 200-hour online yoga teacher training. It's not just for folks that want to be teachers, it's really for anyone who wants to deepen their practice, who wants to learn how to do the poses, and also the parts of the yoga practice beyond the yoga postures, because the yoga poses are just a small piece of the yoga practice. So head to the description box. I've got a freebie for you. You can access 3 free videos directly from my teacher training, and also a link to learn all about it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.